46 years ago, when Braun was just a 5-year-old orc, he already knew he wasn't like the others. Sure, he was stronger than the rest, but it wasn't just that he was also smarter. This intelligence made it tough for him to truly connect with his fellow orcs. In an effort to fit in, he tried teaching them useful things like how to make a fire or build a house. Thanks to Braun's efforts, orc society made some impressive strides. But instead of bonding with them, his brethren started treating him like a god, which only further isolated him. One stormy day, while Braun was away, disaster struck. Every last orc in his pack was wiped out by an accident caused by the storm. When Braun returned, he found himself standing among the dead, his entire family gone. But instead of sorrow or rage, he felt nothing. That was the moment he realized just how truly alone he was in the world. Later, while reading by the fire, having just taken down a wyvern like it was no big deal, Braun was rudely interrupted by a man who came charging out of the bushes, sword drawn. Braun easily dodged the attack, leaving the man stunned. After all, orcs weren't exactly known for their agility, or their literacy, for that matter. But here was Braun, not only reading a book, but having slain a wyvern terrorizing a nearby village. Embarrassed, the man apologized, explaining he was on a quest to exterminate the orcs in the area. Braun shrugged it off, he was used to humans being quick to attack. The man, intrigued by this unusually calm and capable orc, sat down for a chat. Hours later, the man had Braun's entire life story. The loneliness, the isolation, the dream of finding someone strong enough to challenge him in a fight. Braun had it all, except for an equal. The man understood. He had a dream of his own that was just out of reach. He once fought alongside a hero named Yamato, a legend Braun had read about in a book. Yamato's story was supposedly over 200 years old, so you can imagine Braun's surprise when the man casually mentioned that he was the one who wrote the book. Apparently, the tales were all true, including the man's current goal of defeating Kaiser Alpia. This piqued Braun's interest. Maybe defeating Kaiser would bring him closer to finding a true rival. And so, they formed the Orichalcum Fist Party, and as word spread, strong fighters began to join. Yet despite their skills, none could give Braun the fistfight he craved. Undeterred, Braun created a brutal training regimen to help his new comrades reach his level. But Mazet, one of the group's more level-headed members, took one look at it and told Braun straight up, no one alive could survive this. Realizing Mazet was right, Braun abandoned his dream of finding a worthy opponent until now. As he squared off against Rick, who had been training alongside him for some time, Braun apologized for derailing the fight with his long-winded backstory. Rick, however, was lost in thought. Braun wanted a pure fistfight, but so far, Rick had relied on magic and quick maneuvers. Then, he remembered Braun's story about the orc tradition of the quarter thumbs up, a gesture that meant both fighters would abandon all defense and focus solely on trading blows. Though he might regret it later, Rick extended his hand, signaling his readiness for the brutal exchange. Braun was floored. Internally, Rick was already apologizing to himself, and to Renette there was no way he was coming out of this fight in one piece. Renette, watching from the sidelines, found it endearing that Rick was willing to risk it all to fulfill Braun's dream. Braun returned the quarter thumbs up, and they launched into the fight, each landing devastating punches on the other. The sheer force of their battle began to crack the magical barrier around the arena. Seeing this, Mazet asked Alice to assist with some magic, and together, they teleported the spectators out of harm's way, except for Kerwin, who Mazet figured could handle the fallout. The barrier finally shattered as Rick and Braun continued trading explosive blows. After a particularly brutal exchange, Rick found himself face first in the dirt after a backflip gone wrong. As he struggled to rise, bruised and battered, Rick's mind raced back to his training. He wasn't about to let this fight end just yet. Rick charges at Braun again, throwing a wild punch with everything he's got. Braun, of course, counters with his own, and the two keep swinging, fists slamming into each other's faces. Braun's clearly getting a kick out of this. He punches Rick so hard that the poor guy flies into a wall, taking a chunk of the stadium with him. It looks like Rick is down for the count. He's barely got the strength to twitch a finger. Rick figures he's done well enough, given that he was up against a powerhouse like Braun, and maybe now he can limp home and take a well-earned nap. But Braun? Oh no, he's not done yet. The guy looks like he's just getting warmed up. Rick's body, on the other hand, is a wreck. Angelica's convinced there's no way he can keep going, but the others know better. Rick's still got some gas in the tank. For Braun, this is just a friendly fist fight. For Rick, it's a whole trial of endurance, self-worth, and grit. Sure, he's not quite on Braun's level yet, but that just means he's got to push harder. So, Rick clenches his fists, and boom, a fiery red aura bursts out around him. Surprise! Turns out, Rick's got a secret skill no one told Braun about, and now he's using it. Braun is floored metaphorically, for now because he had no idea Rick could pull this off. Apparently, the rest of the crew trained Rick in secret, so he could harness his skill at the right moment. The condition to activate it. Facing off against someone way stronger than him, and it's not fueled by magic or strength, but pure, unshakable willpower. Rick charges in again, fists blazing with power, and smashes into Braun with a punch way stronger than before. Braun hits back, but this time Rick doesn't get blown away. He stands his ground. As they fight, Braun has an epiphany. He always thought finding someone on his level would make him feel less lonely. But now he realizes he's never been alone. He's got friends who went to great lengths just to make him happy, and that means the world to him. As the brawl drags on, both fighters start to run on fumes. The next hit is going to decide it all. Summoning the last bits of their strength, they charge at each other for one final blow, a massive headbutt that could probably be felt in the next town over. When the dust settles, both Rick and Braun are still standing. Rick lets out a laugh, complimenting Braun on being, well, ridiculous. Even after throwing everything at him, Rick still couldn't bring him down. Then, Rick collapses, but before Braun follows suit, he tells Rick, "You didn't lose, man. The only reason the fight ended like this is because you respected my dream of a fair fist fight. Honestly, if anyone won, it's you." Braun collapses right after, both of them out cold. Some time later, Rick wakes up in the hospital, the champion's belt sitting on his chest, with Rionette by his side. Turns out, Rick's been out for 3 days, and everyone was starting to get a little anxious. But hey, considering last time he used his skill he was out for a full week. This is progress. Rick is glad to be awake, but he's confused. Why does he have the belt? He distinctly remembers going down first. Apparently, Braun insisted Rick take it, saying he was the real victor. Rick's flattered, but let's be real, Braun is like a Dark Souls boss. The guy probably had 2 more health bars and a secret healing spell up his sleeve. Sure, Rick held his own, but if Braun had pulled out all the stops, Rick knows he would have been toast. Braun reassures Rick, telling him he's stronger than he thinks. He also thanks the crew for training Rick, though they all try to downplay their involvement. Rick, meanwhile, had no clue this was the plan all along, and he's pretty surprised. With their mission wrapped up, Braun pulls out the jewel from the champion's belt and hands it to Rionette. She whips out a perfect fake to replace it, and Alice uses her magic to give it a boost, making it indistinguishable from the real deal. Angelica decides to just not ask questions. At this point, Rick remembers something and asks Braun about Reinhard, the guy from his flashback. Braun doesn't know Reinhard's exact age, but he explains that Reinhard's skill stops him from aging much. Rick wonders if he's off on some epic mission. But now Reinhard's just dodging his publisher because he's way behind on a book deadline. Later that night, Snake meets with Kerwin to tell him that both Rick and Braun turned down the champion title and returned the belt. Kerwin's next in line for the title, but he's not exactly thrilled about being champion again because of a technicality. The next morning, as the gang gets ready to head home, Rick realizes he packed way too much food, so they had to get a carriage to haul it. Alice is sad Angelica has to leave, but Angelica promises to visit soon, especially since she wants Braun to train her. Rick, shocked, asks if she has a death wish. But Angelica, fully aware she might have to die a few times to get stronger, is more than ready. She plans to not only catch up to Rick but surpass him, and Rick can't wait to see how strong she'll be when they meet again. Angelica teases Rick about his plan to run back home, pointing out that it's 3,000 kilometers away. Rick, ever the overachiever, says he ran here in 3 days, no big deal. But Angelica reminds him that the goods he bought will take months to arrive by horse. Alice steps in, saying it's not a problem, Maylette can just hit the horse with some magical rocket fuel, and they're good to go. As Rick's about to leave, Rionette stops him, asking when they're going to take that hot spring trip. Flustered, Rick says he didn't win the fight, so he doesn't feel right accepting such a reward. Mazette, amused, proposes a race back to the castle. If Rick wins, they go on the trip. If he loses, he has to do 100 times the training. Rick doesn't like the sound of that and tries to negotiate the training down to 10 times. But before he can finish, Mazette and Braun have already taken off. Rick chases after them. If you enjoyed watching Rick take punches, activate his hidden powers, and nearly collapse from exhaustion, make sure to hit subscribe and like. It's way easier than surviving 100x the training.